I'd like to tell you about the worst medical decision I've ever made in my entire life. It was about 8 years ago, and I had this problem where I would get multiple sinus infections every year. If anybody else has this where you can only breathe out of one side of your nose, that was the problem for a long time. I don't know how I ever slept. And so I got an appointment with the ENT to look up my nostrils. He's like, yeah, you're way sideways. You need you need to have your deviated septum fixed. And so I got the surgery scheduled. I was going to have to go under. There was one other thing they were going to have to remove something. I don't remember what it was. But at the same time, we had just had our fourth child, Luke. And we decided, 4 is a great number. Let's not have any more. And so I scheduled a vasectomy. And the guy who does a vasectomy is a urologist, and so I went to meet at the urologist's office, and he was telling me the vasectomy happens in the office, so I'm awake for all of it, and I didn't really like the idea of being awake for my vasectomy. And I also had this other, procedure that was going to happen, and so the urologist was actually a family friend, and I said, look, I'm going to be under for my deviated septum. Would you consider doing the vasectomy while I'm under? And he looked at his calendar and he was like, sure. Big mistake. Okay, so first of all, if you haven't had a deviated septum fix, you wake up and you're just your eyes are just running profusely and it hurts in your nose. And I'm not even going to talk about the other stuff. But it was painful. One of the procedures on its own would have been painful, and then the second procedure on its own would have been painful. But it's Amy says I got the 1-2 punch, upstairs and downstairs, I do not recommend this. Do not do this. The reason I'm telling you this story and embarrassing myself today is because that's kind of how pain works, isn't it? You've got something in your life that happens that is painful. And it usually just doesn't come in ones. Pain usually comes in pairs. Something in your life happens that's painful. And then just when you think it can't get any worse, something else happens. And it's your pain is compounded. I'm probably the only one in the room who's had a vasectomy and deviated septum on the same day. Not something I'm proud of, by the way, but I am not the only person in the room who has dealt with pain compounded by more pain. And that's what we're talking about today, is pain. I don't know what kind of pain you face in your life. I do know that every single one of us in this room has dealt with pain and more pain and more pain, because the longer you're alive, the more pain you experience. I do know that some people in this room have dealt with some of the most painful things you could even imagine. For starters, childbirth. Never dealt with that one, but I've heard stories, seen stories. And people have been through divorce, which I come from a divorced home, so I've seen the pain that divorce causes. Losing a loved one, gosh, so painful. Cancer, painful. Whether it's physical, emotional, relational, I don't know, maybe just think about it for a second. What is it for you that has caused you pain in your life? Maybe there's something right now. Maybe you're in a season that's hey, this actually isn't a painful season. Maybe just, if that's you, take this message and keep it in your back pocket, because pain, if you're not experiencing it right now, it's coming. You may be experiencing pain in your body, pain in your relationships, pain in your own mental health. Pain isn't something that just, the less fortunate deal with. It's something that we all deal with at some point. And so no matter what your mental health struggle is, no matter what your physical ailment might be, no matter what your relational difficulty is, can we all just agree that pain is not good for your mental health? It hurts. Another thing that's kind of eye-opening is that the more we're learning about the science of mental health, the more that there's actually a blurred line between mental and emotional pain and physical pain. So I did a little research this week, and according to the National Library of Medicine, here's what they say: experiences of social rejection, exclusion, or loss are generally considered to be some of the most painful experiences that we endure. Why is it that these negative social experiences have such a profound impact on our emotional well-being? Emerging evidence suggests that experiences of social pain, the painful feelings associated with social disconnection, rely on some of the same neurobiological subtraits that underline experiences of physical pain. Understanding the ways in which physical and social pain overlap may provide new insights into the surprising relationship between these two types of experiences. I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but it's kind of eye-opening. I've always thought physical pain and emotional pain are completely separate things. But this same organization, they did a study, and they found that acetaminophen treats emotional pain just as well as it treats physical pain. I'm not trying to make this like an Advil commercial, but so here's the question. What will you do with your pain? You got some options. You can choose to medicate it, right? Acetaminophen, which actually can really help in the short term. And then if you actually look long term at medicating your pain, it destroys your life. So be careful. Distraction can help you ignore your pain. But then sometimes when you're trying to distract yourself from your pain, it comes out sideways, doesn't it? Either at the people you love, or maybe even at strangers who are just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sometimes you want to let pain, or maybe not even let it, but sometimes pain fuels your anger. Maybe pain fuels your anxiety. Or maybe for some of you, you just want to white knuckle your way through your pain. Be tough. And the longer you do that, you know this, the more it ruins your relationships. The longer someone's done that you've been close to, the more it's ruined your relationship with them. And so restoration therapy teaches us that there's 4 responses to the pain of trauma. There's blame, shame, control, and escape. Sound familiar? Anybody ever struggle? I never do that. No, I do all those. I blame, I shame. Shame is probably my first one. And then anger that's kind of how I blame, right? And then I'll try to perform, which is controlling the situation. And escape, like get my mind off of it, do something else. These are all damaging responses. And we learned all these responses as a survival instinct, right? In our childhood. We learned to do these things that help us mitigate our pain as kids. And the problem is, these things that we learned as kids that were kind of survival instincts for us, as we grow up, they destroy your life. They destroy your relationships, and they really hurt the heart of God too, to see you hurt yourself, to see you hurt other people. I will say that Israel's most famous king, David, he was no stranger to pain. If you've ever studied his life, all the way through, he faced instance after instance where he dealt with pain. First of all, he was the youngest sibling. Anybody else youngest sibling pain in the house? Man, youngest siblings get beat up the most. Youngest siblings get looked at left alone the most. Youngest siblings experience pain. And then that wasn't the only pain he experienced, right? When we find him in Psalm 34 today, he is being hunted. I don't know if you've ever been hunted by someone trying to kill you. I can't imagine the pain of being hunted. He's experienced the pain of humiliation. Where we find him is right after he had to act like a lunatic to get out of the city of Gath, where the hometown of Goliath, the giant that he killed, because the king of Gath was about to have him killed. But David starts acting crazy and writing on walls and saying gibberish, and they let him go. I'm sure David was humiliated. That's painful, right? Pain of humiliation. What about the pain of waiting? Can we all agree sometimes it's just painful to be in a place of waiting? David had been anointed king of Israel by Samuel the prophet, but he had not become king yet. Saul was still on the throne. And then probably one of the hardest pains that David had to deal with was the pain of betrayal. Because Saul, his king, who had given him his own daughter to marry, had now turned on him and had made him his enemy. So much pain. And then not to mention David on the run, he never had food, he didn't have protection. Like the pain of hunger is a real pain too. At one point we even know that he was so desperate that he went to a temple and ate the show bread of the presence of God, which a lot of people thought was wrong at the time. And so we're going to catch him in Psalm 34. We're kind of reading the last section today. It's verses 17 through 19. And I want you to just imagine once again, he's made his way out of Gath. He's back into the wilderness. Maybe he's gotten into the cave, and some of his mighty men have come to join him. And he's teaching them this song in the cold, wet cave. And he pulls out his lyre, which is kind of like a harp, guitar situation. And he's singing this song, and I think he's asking them to sing with him. Earlier in the psalm, it says that. It says, sing with me, glorify the Lord with me. And some of the most famous lines that have ever been written, some of the most famous songs that we sing in our worship is based on this psalm. And this is kind of David leading the last verse of the song. Psalm 34, verses 17 through 19. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. The righteous person may have troubles, but the Lord delivers him from them all. He protects all of his bones, and not one of them will be broken. Do you listen to the language of these verses? Cry out, brokenhearted, troubles, crushed in spirit. What I hear in this passage is a man who has experienced excruciating pain. And he didn't shove it down deep the way a lot of us were good at that, right? No, he didn't do that. He didn't shove it down deep. He chose to feel it. And so this is a very simple first step for you. You must choose to feel your pain. You must choose to feel your pain. You know when feelings are the most damaging? When you are unaware of them. Sometimes I'll get in this place where I'm a little agitated, a little frustrated, and I'll say something, I'll kind of snap at Amy. You know what she'll say? She'll say, "You're not mad at me." And I'll think about it for a second. I'm like, "You're right." She's such a good wife. And she's a good mom too. Like when our kids are hurt or when something is really upsetting them, you know what she tells them? Like, give your feeling a name and say what you're feeling out loud. And somehow when you do that, it kind of loses a sense of power over you, doesn't it? Like when you are able to articulate your pain, say your pain. I know it's painful, but you have to let your pain be what it is. Acknowledge it. Verse 17, the righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. We don't like to let people see us cry, do we? Maybe you're fine with it. I'm a crier. I'll cry. I've cried up here before. I might cry today before the morning is over. But there's something that happens when you cry. God created your body so that when you cry, it releases endorphins, the body's natural painkillers. And it releases oxytocin, which is the feel-good relational hormone. It's the kind of hormone that's released when you have a long hug. There's another study that says that when you cry, the stress hormone, cortisol, actually comes out in your tears. You can cry the stress out of your body. God knows it's good to cry out. That word in Hebrew, cry out, it's a powerful word. Tsasak is the Hebrew word. And it means to call, to make an appeal, to shriek. And it's exactly what happened. If you go back to the history of Israel, when they were being held captive before they even got held captive, if you look at, Israel was still in Israel, but if you look at Egypt, and Joseph, one of the sons of Israel, Jacob, had been taken to Egypt, and he worked his way up the ranks, and he had made a prophecy to the Pharaoh that there was going to be 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. And so when the 7 years of famine came, this is the word that it used to talk about the way that the people of Egypt cried out to Pharaoh. They cried out, Sasak. They cried out for food, just as Joseph predicted they would. To cry out in desperation. Crying can look like crying. It's good for you. Crying can look like prayer. Every day I get on my knees, and it's good for me. Crying can look like yelling. Crying out can look like whispering to God. It can look like journaling. You can also cry out to someone else. In fact, I'll admit, when I go see my therapist, I'm going tomorrow. He helps me articulate how I need to cry out to God. Sometimes when I'm processing something with the men in my group, I'm going to men's group tonight, they help me figure out how I need to cry out to God or what I need to cry out to God. It's meant to be relational. And it's not just about crying out to other people. Ultimately, you want to cry out to God. He's the most important person to cry out to. But when your pain especially is traumatic, you need help figuring out how to cry out, giving yourself the language, giving yourself the tools to cry out. I know it can feel vulnerable to think about crying out to God because it's kind of admitting your weaknesses and acknowledging your need for Him, but I promise you it's worth it. And you get the best reward you could ever imagine when you do cry out to God. It says, the righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. Man, I want to be heard by God. Not just that He hears them, He delivers them from all their troubles. Man, I got troubles. I want to be delivered. And then maybe the best part. That next verse 18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Close to the brokenhearted, save those who are crushed in spirit. This verse really does describe two different ways that our pain manifests. First of all, a brokenhearted situation is like when something is just shattered. This can be a sudden loss. This can be a betrayal. This is like an acute moment of deep pain instantly. But then that second part where it says crushed in spirit isn't an instant thing. Crushed in spirit is an internal, ongoing process of being beaten down, ground into dust, losing all hope, and feeling powerless. I've been there too. So whether it's this moment of shattering, broken heart, or whether it's this long-term feeling of being crushed in spirit, God is near to the brokenhearted, and He saves those who are crushed down. When you're in that spot, when you feel brokenhearted, or you feel crushed in spirit, it can be a very isolating feeling. Even if you have people around you, you kind of feel alone. But this verse says you're not. Because God is near to the brokenhearted. So here's the good news. You can feel God's nearness in pain. You can feel God's nearness in your pain. How cool is that? If you feel like I can't feel God's nearness, is it possible that you have not allowed yourself to access your pain? Because God is near to the brokenhearted. You can feel it. You can feel his nearness. He's a good father. No good parent stays distant when their child is truly hurting. There may be a good parent who stays distant when they think their child is faking. But I'll tell you what, every good parent runs to their child when they're in pain. You go to them, you hold them tenderly. This week I saw a picture of one of my kids, 4 years old, jumped off a trampoline, broken arm. And I will never forget the tenderness with which I grabbed that little body and scooped it up and took it to the ER and so gentle as I could possibly be, trying to comfort, trying to be there. God is so much of a better father than I am. He is tender with you in your pain. He is near to you. He is there for you. You can almost feel him holding you. And this nearness, this care is not a one-time promise. Verse 19, the righteous person may have many troubles, but the Lord delivers him from a few. Wait, no, that's not what it says. The Lord delivers him from them all. He protects a couple of his bones. No, that's not what it says. He protects all his bones. Not one of them will be broken. The idea of the righteous person having troubles may go against the way you were raised. See, a lot of us in our childhood, we were taught put good out into the universe and good will come to you. It's BS. The righteous person will have many troubles, not just a few. You ever read Job? We're going to study Job next year. It is a case study on intense suffering. Can I tell you, Job's suffering didn't come because he was evil. It actually came because he was righteous, because he was walking in a right relationship with God. God even suggests it. It's fascinating. So we are not immune from pain even when you're walking right with God. Can I get an amen? Gosh, even if you're faithful to God and you're doing the right things, problems are going to come. That is the result, not of your mistakes, but just of living in a fallen world. We all live in the consequences of living in a fallen world. Even Jesus said, in this world you will have troubles. He said it to his disciples, and man, almost all of them died for their faith. He said, in this world you may have troubles, but take heart, because I have overcome the world. So when it says not one of his bones will be broken, I hope you know that's not literal, right? That would be kind of funny if it was literal. Can I get a show of hands? Anybody else besides me not broken a bone? I don't think my septum was a bone. So that's who's righteous, right? If we take this literally. Everyone else, you're busted. We're righteous. No, it's not literal. It's not meant to be literal. This is not how God operates. But I will tell you that in the ancient world, it was a much bigger deal to break a bone than it is now. Here's why. Because now we can set that bone. And they put us under before they set it because it is excruciating. And they have ways to measure that the bone is perfectly set. But, setting a bone in ancient Israel was a guessing game. And then even when it healed, it would heal in a way where you're permanently crippled because of this broken bone. You live with a disability the rest of your life. And so it is devastating, not to mention if it was a compound fracture, the possibility of infection easily led to death almost every time. And so a major break in bone was extremely dangerous. In ancient Israel. Another way to kind of think about the context of this statement about how none of the bones being broken, if you think about the way they saw the body in ancient Israel, it was a very sacred way of seeing the body. The bones represented the core of our humanity. So by saying God protects all his bones and not one is broken, it means that the core of the one who trusts God, he is protected, and he is sustained. Another really fascinating thing that we don't think about because we weren't raised with some of the stories that these guys in the cave with David were raised with. But when he says, not one of their bones will be broken, they immediately thought back to this story that they were told every year on one of their biggest holidays, Passover. You see, back in Egypt, right? Joseph took all the people from Israel to Egypt. Generations and generations, they became slaves. And when God wanted to release his people, he sent Moses to tell Pharaoh, let my people go. And so Pharaoh said no, and then God sent plagues. And then the very last plague was going to be the worst one. God was going to send the angel of death to every home to take the firstborn. And he said to his people, he said, what you're going to do is you're going to find a perfect, spotless lamb, and you're going to kill it. But do not let one of its bones be broken. Because this perfect, spotless lamb with no bones broken, the blood of this lamb will cover the doorpost, and the angel of death will pass over. That's why we call it the Passover. And so when he says this, when he says not one of his bones will be broken, that's what they thought of. They thought of the Passover lamb. And now today, when we look at it, we don't just think back to the Passover lamb, but actually, the Passover lamb and this Psalm 34 point to Jesus. Not one of his bones will be broken. The Apostle John looked back and he quoted this verse, this Psalm. John 19:33-36. But when they came to Jesus and found that he was already dead on the cross, they did not break his legs. That was normal. When someone died on the cross, they would break their legs, and that would be the last straw in making sure that they died. But they knew he was already dead. Here's how. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with the spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. The water had separated from the blood. That's how you know he was dead. And then John interjects, verse 35. The man who saw it has given testimony, and his testimony is true. He knows that he tells the truth, and he testifies so that you may believe these things happen, so that the scripture would be fulfilled. Not one of his bones will be broken. Jesus' body was broken, but none of his bones were broken because he was the perfect sacrifice. That's why the Passover even happened, was to show that Jesus is the perfect sacrifice that died in our place so that we can have a relationship with our Father in heaven and live eternally with him. So here's the hard truth today. The promises in Psalm 34 are only available to those who have surrendered their lives to Jesus, because he is the only sacrifice worthy. If you are separated from God, if you're living your own way, none of these promises in Psalm 34 apply to you. I know that sounds harsh, but it's true, and real friends tell each other the truth. I hope you will see me as a friend. And for those of us who have placed our trust in Jesus, we can expect three things. We can expect three things in our pain. We can expect trouble, deliverance, and protection. The righteous person may have many troubles. Expect trouble. The Lord delivers him from them all. Expect deliverance. He protects all of his bones. Protection. Trouble. Deliverance. Protection. Expect trouble. Expect deliverance. Expect protection. First of all, expect trouble. You know what another word for trouble is? More pain. Anybody here know what Murphy's Law is? Anything that can go wrong. Yeah, they actually named it after an Air Force engineer named Edward A. Murphy, Captain Edward A. Murphy. He worked at Edwards Air Force Base in 1949, and he was working on this project with a sled to see how many G-force the human body can take. No, thank you. I will not be part of that study. And so they had 16 different sensors that they had to attach to the human test subject. And so the technician attached all 16, and they did the test, and after the test, nothing worked. And they found out not only was one of the sensors messed up, not 2, not 3, not 10, all 16 sensors were installed wrong. And it wasn't even Murphy who did it. It was actually, he was talking about the technician, and here's what he says: if there's any way to do it wrong, he will. And so now this statement by Edward Murphy has morphed into Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And when you expect trouble, this is still ingrained into the culture of the military. Because when you're prepared for trouble and trouble comes, guess what? You're prepared for trouble. You're not surprised, you're ready. So stop being so surprised by trouble. Brian, stop being so surprised by trouble, because trouble's coming. It's part of life. It reminds me God is my Savior and my deliverer. The world is broken. It won't always be that way, because guess what? The second thing I can expect, and you can expect, is deliverance. Expect deliverance. We can kind of be cocky about this. We can be confident. Not that we know how it's going to happen, just that we know it's coming, because our God comes through. Jesus is the deliverer. There was this story in when was it? It was in the 1100s, 1192. King Richard the Lionheart was shipwrecked on the way back from his third trip doing crusades, right? And so it was bad enough to be shipwrecked. He was captured by Austria and was held for ransom for 150,000 marks of silver, which is 3 times the king's annual income. And so it was a ton of money. And it didn't matter how much money he needed. His family had to raise taxes to a level that crippled the people of England and part of France that they ruled to pay off this Duke Leopold of Austria. But can I tell you, the legend says King Richard never once questioned whether or not he would be released. Never once. He was so confident that whatever the price was, his family would pay it. And he was quoted saying, "They know well, my men and my barons of England, Normandy, Poitou, and Gascony, that I never had a companion so poor that I would leave him in prison for money." Listen, he knew deliverance was certain because he knew his worth. He knew how valuable he was more than any money. And you and I can be certain that deliverance is coming because we can be sure of our value. You are more valuable than anything. There's nothing more valuable than you. You know why I know that? Because I know what has been paid for your soul. God sent his one and only Son, perfect, without sin, fully God and fully man, to live a perfect life and die on the cross to pay for you. You are of the highest value. That's why you can be certain that your deliverance is coming. Deliverance is inevitable because your worth is astronomical. You can be confident that it's coming. Now, I will say, it's not always going to look like what you think it's going to look like. I think Richard the Lionheart, he was confident that deliverance was coming, and what he expected was that his family would come together and they would go and rescue him. But can I tell you, actually, that's not what happened. There was never a rescue plan put into action. In fact, his own brother, Prince John, collaborated with the King of France to try to keep him in prison. And so it left his elderly mom to be the one to raise the taxes to pay for his ransom. The reason I'm telling you this is because as much as you can be certain of your deliverance, you can't name the specifics of how God is going to come through. There are people who think that somehow they can bend reality to their will through faith, and that is not how God works. In fact, God is the only one who can bend reality to his will. And so you and I, we can't name and claim specific things, but we can name and claim that God is coming through, that he will deliver us. He will bring deliverance. So expect trouble, expect deliverance, and then third, expect protection. Not always from your body, especially not from pain. Because God actually knows that pain is good for us, and he will not withhold good things from us. Your protection is also tied to your identity. Because you're God's kid, he's got you. He's going to protect you. When I was in college, I worked at this summer camp that families came to, and one of the coolest families that came was the son and grandkids of Chuck Norris. Yeah, so everybody wanted to know, what was it like to be raised in a house where Chuck Norris is your dad? And the guy said, well, nobody really messed with me. That's kind of us, right? Like, do you know who my father is? There's a reputation there. And it's not necessarily that you're not going to experience pain on this earth. You will. You are protected in a way that is the most important way to be protected in your soul. In the part of you that is eternal. So yeah, your body's going to face pain. Your body will die someday. But your soul is protected into eternity. And one day, he will give you a new body that won't experience any pain or suffering. Revelation 21 gives us a little glimpse into it. Verse 4, he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more pain, no more death, no more mourning, crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. I've experienced a lot of pain in my life. Even in just the process of planting this church, I've experienced a lot of pain. I've been criticized in ways that I never thought I'd be criticized. My integrity has been attacked. My leadership. It's put a strain on my family relationships, both like here and even with family members that are still in Texas, is where I'm from. But can I tell you that I've done the stuff that David is telling us to do? And I can stand by it. Even in the midst of the pain that I've experienced, I have cried out, both to God and to other people. And crying really does help. Like physically crying, but then also just relationally crying to the Father helps. I haven't hidden my pain. I've been honest. I've tried not to dwell on it, but I've allowed myself to feel it. And you know what's happened? In my pain, I've never felt nearer to God. You want to feel the presence of God. Acknowledge your pain and cry out to him. He's near to the brokenhearted. And when he's near, what else matters? I've come to expect these things that he tells us to expect. I expect trouble. I expect deliverance. I expect protection. And it doesn't mean that I like dealing with pain. I hate it. But I hope that eventually I'm kind of like that sadistic person that smiles when something painful is coming. Because I know. I want to have this mentality. God is going to use it to make me into the man he wants me to become. You know what they called David? He is a man after God's own heart. I don't know if there's a better compliment in history than that. But it took a lot of pain in his life. There's a book Samuel Chan wrote called Leadership Pain. It's based on this idea that you will only grow to the threshold of your pain. I want to read you a couple quotes from the book that I think are helpful. He says, reluctance to face pain is your greatest limitation. There is no growth without change, no change without loss, and no loss without pain. When you interpret your pain as bigger, more important, more threatening, more comprehensive than your vision, you'll redefine your vision down to the threshold of your pain. And here's the last one. Difficulties are God's curriculum for those who want to excel. So will you allow yourself to experience pain? Will you allow yourself to walk towards more pain in your life? Anybody who knows about C.S. Lewis, if you've ever looked at his life, he tasted pain in a way that very few can relate to. He lost his mother at an early age. He saw his dad emotionally abandon him. He suffered a respiratory disease at 11 years old. Then as a young adult, he fought in World War I. He had an artillery shell explode next to him, leaving shrapnel in his chest and his leg that stayed with him to the rest of his life. He lost his wife, Joy, when she was 45 years old, to cancer. And then finally, Lewis succumbed to kidney failure at age 64. Before he died, he wrote this book called The Problem of Pain, and may it haunt you the rest of your week. Pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. And so whatever you're facing, is it possible this is God's megaphone? I think the answer is yes. There's kind of a correlation between how long you live and how much pain you're going to experience. It's very simple. I made a graph for us. Do we have the graph? Maybe not. No graph, that's okay. Well, I'll just tell you how it goes, right? If you imagine this is the level of pain, and this is your life. The longer you live, the more pain you experience. And maybe it'll dip and go back up, and it'll dip and it'll go back up. But the longer you're alive, the more you're going to know pain. Until one day, when the pain becomes zero. Because there will be a day when you will no longer experience pain. And so this is kind of what you will experience the rest of your life. You will, listen to me, you will no more pain until no more pain. Like, this is what we can expect. No more pain until no more pain. May we be those who courageously walk towards that, knowing more pain until there will be no more pain.